Locked in death row, a day in a condemned prisoner's life. If you're brave enough to step into the darkest corners of the justice system, hit that subscribe button right now, smash the like, and drop a comment telling me if you could survive even one day in the shoes you're about to walk in. Because what you're about to hear will haunt you long after this video ends. The steel door slams shut at 5:47 a.m. every single morning. No exceptions. No mercy. The sound echoes through Unit 12 of Holman Correctional Facility in Alabama, a place where time doesn't pass, it suffocates. This is death row, and for the men locked inside these 6-by-9-foot cells, every sunrise is a countdown to an execution date they may or may not know. Marcus Chen had been here for 9 years. 9 years of the same routine, the same walls, the same crushing silence interrupted only by the screams of men losing their minds 3 cells down. He woke every morning to fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry insects, casting a sickly yellow glow over the concrete tomb he called home. No windows. No natural light. Just 4 walls, a metal toilet, a thin mattress, and a small steel mirror bolted to the wall, scratched so badly he could barely see his own reflection anymore. Breakfast came at 6:15 a.m., slid through a narrow slot in the door. Cold oatmeal, stale bread, watered-down juice that tasted like rust. Marcus ate it anyway, not because he was hungry, but because the alternative was starvation, and he wasn't ready to give the state that satisfaction. Not yet. The guards barely looked at him. To them, he wasn't Marcus Chen, the former college student who once had dreams of becoming an architect. He was inmate 4827, a condemned man, a problem to be managed until the day they strapped him to a gurney and pumped chemicals into his veins. Human contact was a luxury he hadn't felt in months. Even his lawyer only visited twice a year now, each time with the same empty promises about appeals that went nowhere. By 8 a.m., the noise started. Somewhere down the corridor, a man named Chen was banging on his cell door, screaming that the guards were poisoning his food. Another inmate, Rodriguez, was singing hymns in Spanish, his voice cracking with desperation. Marcus had learned to block it out, to retreat so far into his own mind that the chaos became white noise. But today felt different. At 10:30 a.m., something happened that shattered the routine. The warden himself appeared outside Marcus's cell, flanked by 2 guards Marcus had never seen before. The warden's face was pale, his jaw tight. He stared at Marcus through the reinforced glass window, and for a moment, neither man spoke. "Chen," the warden finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk about your case." Marcus's heart began to pound. In 9 years, the warden had never come to his cell. Never spoken his name. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't normal. "They found something," the warden continued, his eyes darting to the guards. "Something that changes everything." But when they opened the locked evidence box that had been sealed since Marcus's trial, what they found inside made every person in that corridor freeze in horror. The evidence box had been sealed for 9 years, gathering dust in a climate-controlled vault 3 floors beneath the warden's office. Inside were the items that had convicted Marcus Chen of a crime that shocked the nation. The brutal murder of Jennifer Hartwell, a 23-year-old graduate student found stabbed 17 times in her apartment. Marcus's fingerprints on the knife. His DNA under her fingernails. Security footage placing him at the scene. An open and shut case, the prosecutor had called it. A monster taken off the streets. But the item they pulled from that box on this cold Tuesday morning told a completely different story. It was a USB drive. Small, black, unremarkable. One that had never been mentioned in court, never logged into evidence, never shown to Marcus's defense attorney. And according to the chain of custody documents, it had been in that box since the night of Jennifer's murder, deliberately hidden beneath crime scene photographs and blood-spattered clothing. The warden's hands trembled as he held it. Detective Sarah Morrison, who had worked the original case and built her career on Marcus's conviction, stood in the evidence room with her arms crossed, her face drained of color. She knew what was on that drive because she had been the one to hide it. "Play it," the warden ordered, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Jennifer Hartwell's apartment, the night of her murder, captured by a hidden camera she had installed 2 weeks earlier. The timestamp read 11:43 p.m., exactly 37 minutes before Marcus had arrived at her door. And the person standing over Jennifer's body, knife still dripping with blood, wearing gloves and methodically staging the crime scene, was someone no one had suspected. Detective Morrison herself. Drop a comment right now telling me what you would do if you discovered the person who put you on death row was the actual killer. Would you forgive them, or would you want revenge? I need to know what you're thinking. The room erupted into chaos. Two officers grabbed Morrison's arms as she lunged for the laptop, screaming that the video was fake, that someone had doctored it, that this was a setup. But her panic told the truth her words tried to deny. The warden immediately ordered her arrest, and within minutes, Morrison was handcuffed and dragged from the building, her career and her freedom evaporating in the span of a heartbeat. But the nightmare was only beginning. As investigators dug deeper into the USB drive's contents, they found more than just the murder footage. There were files, documents, recordings, evidence of a conspiracy that reached far beyond one corrupt detective. Morrison had been part of a network of law enforcement officers who had been framing innocent people for years, closing cases quickly to boost conviction rates and secure promotions. Marcus wasn't the only victim. There were at least 12 others, all sitting on death row across 3 different states, all convicted on fabricated evidence. If this story is blowing your mind right now, imagine what's coming in the final chapter. Hit that subscribe button because you do not want to miss how this ends. Trust me. Back in his cell, Marcus still didn't know any of this. The warden had left without explanation, and the hours crawled by in agonizing silence. By noon, Marcus was pacing his tiny cell, his mind racing with possibilities. Had they found new evidence against him? Was his execution date being moved up? The uncertainty was its own form of torture, worse than the isolation, worse than the endless waiting. At 2:15 p.m., his cell door opened. Not the meal slot. The actual door. For the first time in 9 years, Marcus Chen stepped out of his cell without restraints. 2 guards stood on either side of him, their expressions unreadable, and they escorted him down corridors he barely remembered, past cells where other condemned men pressed their faces against the glass, watching him with hollow eyes. They brought him to a room he had never seen before. With actual windows that let in real sunlight. And sitting at the table, surrounded by lawyers and FBI agents, was a face he recognized from photographs. Jennifer Hartwell's mother. She looked at Marcus with eyes full of tears, and when she spoke, her voice broke with emotion. "Mr. Chen, I owe you an apology that I will never be able to give properly. My daughter's real killer has been arrested. You're going home." Marcus's legs gave out. He collapsed into a chair, his body shaking, his mind unable to process the words he had just heard. 9 years. 3,285 days of hell. Of planning his own funeral. Of saying goodbye to his family through reinforced glass. Of losing every piece of himself to a system that had destroyed him for a crime he didn't commit. Comment below if you think 9 years of an innocent man's life can ever truly be given back. What would you demand as justice? Because what happens next will shock you even more. But as Marcus sat in that bright room, tasting freedom for the first time in nearly a decade, another problem was emerging. One that nobody saw coming. Detective Morrison, sitting in an interrogation room 3 miles away, had just made a deal with federal prosecutors. She would give them names, locations, evidence on every corrupt officer in the network. But she had one condition. She wanted to tell them about the others. The ones who had helped her frame Marcus Chen. The ones who were still out there, still working cases, still destroying lives. And according to Morrison, one of them was in the room with Marcus right now. The FBI agent standing behind Jennifer's mother slowly reached for his weapon, his eyes locked on Marcus with an expression that had suddenly turned cold and calculating. Because the conspiracy didn't end with Morrison's arrest. It was just beginning. The FBI agent's name was Thomas Reeves, a decorated 15-year veteran with commendations covering his office walls and a reputation for never losing a case. He had been assigned to investigate Detective Morrison's network, to root out corruption and restore faith in the justice system. But as he stood in that bright room with his hand resting on his holstered weapon, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. A small tattoo on Reeves's wrist. 3 interlocking circles. The same symbol Morrison had drawn in the margins of Marcus's case files, the same symbol found etched into the hidden camera Jennifer had installed in her apartment. It wasn't random. It was a signature. Marcus's eyes darted to the door, calculating his chances. He had just been told he was free, that his nightmare was over, but every instinct screamed that he was still in danger. Jennifer's mother sat across from him, oblivious to the shift in the room's energy, still crying tears of relief and apology. The other lawyers were reviewing paperwork, discussing compensation and legal procedures. Nobody else had noticed Reeves's subtle movement toward his gun. "Mr. Chen," Reeves said smoothly, his voice friendly but his eyes predatory. "Before we proceed with your release, we need to debrief you in a secure location. Standard protocol for cases involving law enforcement misconduct. If you'll come with me." It wasn't a request. It was a threat disguised as procedure. "Comment right now if you see where this is going. Would you trust the FBI agent, or would you run? Because Marcus has about 5 seconds to make a choice that will determine if he lives or dies." Marcus stood slowly, his mind racing through 9 years of survival instincts honed in death row. He had learned to read people in that place, to detect danger in the smallest gestures, the briefest glances. And everything about Reeves screamed predator. Before anyone could react, Marcus grabbed the metal water pitcher from the table and swung it hard into Reeves's temple. The agent crumpled, his weapon clattering to the floor. Chaos erupted. Lawyers screamed. Jennifer's mother scrambled backward. But Marcus was already moving, grabbing Reeves's dropped gun and backing toward the door. 2 more agents burst into the room, weapons drawn, shouting commands that contradicted each other in the confusion. "He's one of them," Marcus shouted, pointing at Reeves's unconscious body. "Check his wrist. He's part of Morrison's network." For a terrifying moment, nobody moved. The agents' guns were trained on Marcus, an escaped death row inmate now armed and dangerous, exactly the narrative that would justify shooting him where he stood. But one of the agents, a younger woman named Patterson, hesitated. She had read Morrison's confession. She knew about the symbol. And when she rolled up Reeves's sleeve and saw the 3 interlocking circles tattooed on his forearm, her face went pale. "Stand down," Patterson ordered the other agent. "Chen's telling the truth. Reeves is compromised." The next 6 hours unraveled like a nightmare within a nightmare. Reeves, once conscious, refused to talk, but his phone records told the story his silence tried to hide. He had been communicating with Morrison for years, feeding her information, helping her select targets who would be easy to frame. Marcus had been chosen specifically because he was a loner, a brilliant student with few close friends and a history of insomnia that meant he often walked the streets late at night. The perfect patsy. But the deepest cut came when investigators revealed why Jennifer Hartwell had been murdered in the first place. She hadn't been a random victim. She had been Morrison's former partner's daughter, and she had discovered evidence of the corruption network while researching a criminology thesis. The hidden camera in her apartment had been her insurance policy, her way of documenting what she had found. Morrison had killed her to silence her, then framed Marcus to close the case quickly and bury the investigation. If you're feeling sick to your stomach right now, hit that like button. Because this is the reality of how broken the system can be, and you need to share this story so people understand what's really happening behind closed doors. By 9 p.m., Marcus Chen walked out of the federal building a free man. Truly free this time, with agents he could actually trust escorting him to a safe house while the investigation continued. The media was already swarming, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions about the biggest law enforcement scandal in decades. Marcus ignored them all. He had no words left. 9 years of his life had been stolen by people sworn to protect justice, and no apology, no compensation, no headline could ever give him back what he had lost. 3 months later, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Morrison's network had been completely dismantled. 18 officers arrested. 43 convictions overturned. 12 men walked off death row, blinking in sunlight they thought they would never see again. But the victory felt hollow. Marcus stood in the cemetery where Jennifer Hartwell was buried, holding flowers he had brought every week since his release. He owed her his life. Her courage, her hidden camera, her refusal to let corruption go unchallenged had saved him. But it had cost her everything. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the gravestone. "I'm sorry you had to die for me to live." As he turned to leave, his phone buzzed. A news alert. Another body had been found, 2 states over. Another young woman, another suspicious crime scene. And according to preliminary reports, the lead detective on the case had a small tattoo visible in the crime scene photos. 3 interlocking circles. Drop a comment telling me if you think Marcus should walk away and live his life, or if he should hunt down every last member of this network. And if this story changed how you see the justice system, subscribe right now because next week's case will shake you even harder. The darkness doesn't end just because one story does. Marcus stared at his phone, at the photograph of the tattoo, at the continuation of a nightmare he thought had ended. He had a choice to make. He could disappear, rebuild his shattered life, try to forget the 9 years that had been stolen from him. Or he could fight. He could use what he had learned, what he had survived, to make sure no one else ended up in a 6x9 cell for a crime they didn't commit. The sun was setting as Marcus Chen walked away from the cemetery, his shadow stretching long across the grass. But he wasn't walking toward peace. He was walking toward war. Because some fights don't end when you're proven innocent. They end when the system that destroyed you is torn down and rebuilt from its ashes. And Marcus Chen had 9 years of rage fueling that fire.